Hello you all, this is Professor Bo and I'm bringing you another intermediate Adobe Premiere editing lesson. This one is about the basics of working in the editing workspace. So this looks about where we left off last time with this project. We organized and labeled these clips. And now we are just about ready to begin editing with those clips. Let's go up here and we want to change our workspace to the editing workspace, which is where we're going to get most of our editing done here in Premiere. It's the meat and potatoes of the editing interface. In the newest versions of Premiere, the workspaces are located along the upper right under this icon. So when I instruct you to change a workspace, you'll be using this pull-down menu rather than the old across the top links, unless you are using the older version, of course. One click on editing, and here's our editing workspace. So now we've got a clip source panel on our left, and we have the program panel on our right, which will show us what's playing in our timeline. Our timeline's down here on the bottom, and our project panel has moved over to the lower left corner to make room for the source panel up here. Now in older versions of Premiere, there's a gotcha, and that is when you use your description column or any other column to describe clips, when you change from assembly workspace to editing workspace, you may feel like you've lost that column. But you haven't actually. You just need to drag over and find it. All of the descriptions that you made for your clips will still be there, and we can drag this column over next to our clip names, which is the way we'd like it, and we can go to work from there. So I'm going to start with Master Shot 1. I'm going to double click on 2511. I actually like the performances better in 2511. Oh, and sorry, that's Master Shot 2, not Master Shot 1. So I double click on the icon of 2511. It loads up here, and I'm going to put this in play, and then I'm going to use my I and O keys to designate the first shot that I want to put into the timeline. So I'll put it in play. I'm listening for the action. Oh, I missed it. Okay, I'm going to hit the J key to go backwards. Oh, there was action. Did you hear it? It's very, very subtle. Okay, I hit the I key.
How'd it start?
My parents made me.
Your parents forced you to gamble.
Yeah, my mom and stepmom both charity junkies.
Since when does charity give a chance?
Now I'm going to say J because I actually want to end it after Jesse's line there. That takes us backwards. Okay, my mom, charity junkies.
Mom both charity junkies.
All right, I hit the O key, and now that's defined a range that I want to use in the timeline. And notice that in the timeline, before we put any clips down here, it says drop media here to create a sequence. So I'm going to grab it in the picture here, grab and hold, drop it down here. There's my first clip. It automatically went into video track 1. It automatically went into audio track 1. And you can see our waveforms for the audio here. And notice that the picture is in the program panel on the right. And if I put the program panel in play, there's the very same shot that I dragged down.
How'd it start?
Okay, we don't need to watch the whole thing. Now I want to bring your attention to this. When you drop a clip into an empty timeline, the sequence was named after that first clip that we dragged down. So this sequence is now called 2511. And also the sequence has the same resolution and aspect ratio as this original clip. And over here in our project panel, this is a new item. This is our sequence. Notice the difference in the icons. And I'm going to change the name from 2511 to Scene 25. Enter. And then that changes the name of my timeline here to Scene 25. Okay, now the next thing up. So I've got this to where Jesse says this line.
Yeah, my mom and stepmom are both charity junkies.
Now I'd like to cut to a nice close-up of Stabler because his line comes next. Here's my Stabler close-up 1 and 2. I'll double-click on 25B1 here, and I'll look for that line. I may tap L. I want to remind you that JKL on your keyboard is useful. If you play L, it'll play forward, and if you tap it, it goes faster. Same if you play J, the footage goes backwards. If you tap it, it goes faster. K pauses it. Spacebar plays and pause. And the mark in and out is I and O. Just for review's sake, this is the button for mark in, and this is the button for mark out, and the keyboards or shortcuts are I and O. So now I'm going to hit L and play this a little fast, looking for this line of his. Okay, there's the line. I'm going to hit J. And then I'm going to hit my in mark with I. And
Since when is charity considered a game of chance?
then we'll hit O right there. I could hit I and O while it's playing. Now, we've shown you before that you just grab this and you could drag it on the end here and it'll snap. But I want to show you the more sophisticated use of these buttons now. This button right here is called the overwrite button. Notice that the overwrite button's keyboard shortcut is a period. And with our range designated with I and O, and our playhead in the timeline, our playhead is at the end of the last frame of this clip. This is called 3-point editing. The playhead is 1 point in the timeline, and the range is 2 points in and out on the source monitor. So those 3 points add up to 3-point editing, the general term for this type of editing. I click on the overwrite button. The source range went into the timeline where the playhead was, and we've got our first cut. Take my playhead, pull it back like this, get the last bit of the line here.
Yeah, my mom and stepmom are both charity junkies.
Since when is charity considered a game of chance?
See, that's a kind of a nice cut there. It almost begins to look like real TV. So this is the range that went in to the timeline. And before I hit the overwrite button, the playhead was there. So at this point is where the clip in point came in. And there's the clip out point. And after the overwrite, the playhead goes to the end of the clip. Now the edit went into video and audio tracks 1 because of these designations. If I change these source patch switches to other tracks, then the video or the audio would have been edited to those other tracks. It's important to understand the difference between these source patching targets and these targets. These track patches are when you're pasting something into the timeline from your clipboard. That would now go on to track 3 with the switch this way. I paste something and it'll go up onto track 3. So that's what these on this side are for. But during insert and overwrite editing, these are your source patches for where your footage gets, which track your footage gets edited to. So one way of working is to continue to cut in your ranges from various clips, marking in and out marks, and then using the overwrite button to cut clips into your timeline. But I want to show you another way of working. So I'm going to drag through the clips in my timeline, and I'm going to delete all the clips. I'm going to hit the home key to get my playhead back to the beginning. By the way, if you have a laptop and you don't have a home key, in order to get home, you hold down the function key and you hit the left arrow button, if I remember correctly. The end button, the end key would be hold down the function key and hit the right arrow button. Anyway, here's another way to work. I could load up Master Shot 2, 2511, and I will actually take my range, hover the mouse over it, and I can trim my out point so it goes all the way to the end of the clip. I'll leave my in mark where it is. And then I will drag that clip down to my video track 1 and audio track 1. And then I'm going to hit the backward slash key on the keyboard. That shows me everything in the timeline. And what we can do is we can use the overwrite key, and as we get to the parts where we want to cut, we could do a 3-point edit at those points. In other words, we would be overwriting this entire master shot with certain sections one at a time. So here's my first one. Let's get to where that cutaway was with Stabler.
How'd it start?
My parents made me.
Your parents forced you to gamble.
Yeah, my mom and stepmom are both charity junkies.
Since when does charity give a chance?
Okay, that's the line I want, so I'm going to hit the J key to go backwards. Okay, so my playhead is the first point. That's where the footage will go in. And then I go to the Stabler close-up 1. Now I've still got that range from before. And if I click this button, this takes me to the in point, and I'll put it in play, and you can see that.
Since when is charity considered a game of chance?
There's that line right there. So I'm going to use the overwrite button, and that's going to put this range at this in point, and it'll go about to there. And because this is the overwrite button, it actually covers up what's already in the timeline, and it's going into video 1 and audio 1 track. Okay, so you see that? That's where it went. And the reason it's called overwrite is because it does overwrite the footage that it covers up. So let's see how this looks.
Your parents forced you to gamble.
Yeah, my mom and stepmom are both charity junkies.
Since when is charity considered a game of chance?
You know the biggest fundraising gimmick?
Now that in mark, so you saw what happened. It overwrote the original portion of the master clip and stuck in that Stabler close-up that I wanted. With overwrite, you haven't lost any footage. All the frames are still in the original clip, and you can also undo any overwrite that you've done. Now it was a little rough at the beginning, but actually we're only going for a rough cut with this assignment. Now I want to show you the insert type edit, so I am going to undo the last edit that I did. So with that undo, the clip has been pulled back out from my timeline, and up here in my source monitor I still have my range ready to go, but this time I want to show you the insert function, and the keyboard shortcut is a comma. It's right next to the overwrite, but notice the slightly different icon. Okay, so I'm going to click on insert. Everything else is the same. It's 3-point editing. Now I'm clicking the insert button. Notice how the timeline got longer, and that is because rather than covering up the footage in the timeline, it's like a pair of scissors has cut the timeline, opened a space and the length of the range, and then drops the range in there. And that's why it's called insert rather than overwrite. So watch what this does.
Mom and stepmom are both charity junkies.
Since when is charity considered a game of chance? When does charity give a chance?
What happened there is it didn't cover up the footage. It opened a gap in the timeline, the length of the range, and pushed the rest of the footage down the timeline, which is why Stabler's line is repeated. This makes the timeline longer. Overwrite does not make the timeline longer. I'm going to undo that also and show you where that kind of insert edit might be used to good effect. Now I've changed up my timeline a little bit to show you something. Let's say that I hit the home key, and that takes me to the beginning of my timeline, and that my sequence starts with this.
My parents made me.
Your parents forced you to gamble.
I'm going to hit home again, put the playhead at the beginning. See, I could insert something before that, which is what I need to do, because this starts in the wrong place. This is how insert can be useful. I'm going to go over to, I've got these clips labeled door opens, and I'm going to load that clip into our source. And I've already made in and out marks here. So I'm going to click my go to in mark and show you what I've got here.
High roller, huh?
How'd you start?
My parents.
Okay, and then Jesse says my parents made me. So with my, I want to do 3-point editing with my playhead at the beginning of the timeline. This range where they come in the door and say the first few lines, I'm going to insert this range at the beginning of the timeline. The timeline has gotten longer and my footage was inserted there. The rest of the footage was moved down the length of that range. So this is good use of the insert, and hopefully you can see what it could be used for. Here's the edit.
High roller, huh?
How'd you start?
My parents made me.
Again, that's rough, but we're only working towards a rough cut. Here's something you're going to want to know about. Let's say that you have a clip in your timeline.
High roller, huh?
How'd you start?
My parents.
And for some reason you're not that satisfied with it, and you find another clip that you want to replace it with. This one, I've got a range over here, and this one I'm going to play this little button that is play video into out.
High roller, huh?
How'd you start?
My parents.
Now it looks really similar to the clip, but I like it. I like the way the door closes better on this one. So what you can do is you can select the clip that you want to replace in your timeline, go up to the clip menu and say replace with clip, in this case from my source monitor. That has replaced the clip in the timeline with the one in the source monitor. And it's going to need extra, it often needs extra trimming because these clips are often different lengths, but now this is a completely different take.
High roller, huh?
How'd you start?
And I can tell because of the way the door slams there, and I wanted that particular door slam for a particular reason. Okay, now fast forward, and down here in the timeline, here is my rough cut. Do you see all my clips? And look in the program panel and you'll see that as I drag through this, there's medium shots, there's close-ups. So I edited this over the top of my I edited all these clips over the top of my master shot that I used as a template. And this is my rough cut. There's two things I want to show you before I give you the final word here, and that is, look at this. If I select a clip in the timeline and I hit the delete key, the big delete key, it pulls out the clip and leaves a gap. And then if I select the empty space and hit the delete key, it pulls out the gap. I'm going to undo that twice. Got my clip back in there now. If you don't want to do that in a two-step process, I could select the clip, then hold down the shift key, and I hit the little delete key. That removes the footage and closes the gap in one shot. When you use that function to close the gap, the timeline will get shorter. I'm going to put my clip back in there with an undo. I don't want you to edit anything, any of our footage onto anything except video 1 and audio 1. The reason is because I want you to rough out the whole scene and not be too particular about fixing little things like this in mark here. See, hear this mistake?
Oh, charity junkies.
Since when is
Okay, that's a bad cut. But that's because we're going for a rough cut. And that's all I want us to do with this assignment. Trimming is the next lesson. And the lesson will go smoother with trimming if you follow my advice and only cut your footage into video 1 track and audio 1 track. Here's how to export your sequence with the newest version of Premiere Pro. We need to make sure that our timeline is selected. I'm clicking on the timeline panel down here. It highlights blue. With the newest versions of Premiere, we click on this export button and it takes us to the export area. And we want to give our file a name. So I could change the name here if I wanted to. Let's call it Hoverboard Music Video. The location is this link, which we would click on, and then we could use the Finder to select where I want my music video to go. I say save, and then this indicates the location is going where I selected. The preset, since the destination for this lesson is going to be Vimeo, let's use a Vimeo preset, which we can find down in the lower part of this list where it says More Presets. And you will discover when we scroll down this list, you will find, it's a long list, but you will eventually find Vimeo presets. And generally the smaller numbers will be smaller and the larger numbers will be larger files. I'll select regular high definition 1080p for this. Say OK. And then the format for our lesson, let's choose H.264. It combines small file size with high quality. While we're here, let's have a look at the sidebar on the left where you see that media file is selected, but notice that there's some shortcuts to exporting for YouTube and Vimeo as well. We didn't use that sidebar because I wanted to show you the important choices of the name, location, preset, and format. With those choices made, now we head towards the lower right of the interface. This is where you can see information based on the choices you made. We then say on the lower right, export. Do not send it to the media encoder for this lesson. The blue export button is the one we want to click, and this will take a little bit of time. It finishes the render, and if I hide Premiere and I go look for my file, here is the file. This is my hoverboard music video.mp4. You might want to play it and check it with a Mac. I can hit the space bar and that will play the video and the sound. And if you don't hear any sound, you got to figure out why. I've got my computer sound down so I can talk to you. I'm going to just drag through this to check it, but you watch and listen to the whole thing to make sure that it's good. With older versions of Premiere, you'd export under the File menu. Export Media. And we're going to get this scary looking window. And here's what you need to do for the assignment. Make sure you save this as an H.264 under Format. Since this class is uploading to Vimeo, you could go under Preset, and there's Vimeo presets down here that you could use. Generally, the smaller the number you choose, the smaller the file will be. And if you're not uploading to Vimeo, just choose another preset or take the default. That's going to give us an output of a MP4 file, .mp4. If you want to change the name of the file you're outputting or save it to where you want to save it, we click on this blue link under Output next to Output Name. This will give us our familiar Finder window We can change the name to something like hoverboard music video. And then we'll put this, I'm going to put it in my movies folder. Then I'm going to click on the save button. This has not rendered it yet. It is only designated where the output is going and with what name. Make sure that your export video and audio boxes are checked. They probably will be. And then we can go down here and just say export. Don't say Q. That will run Adobe Media Encoder. We don't need that for this function. I hit the export button. And it will export just like the newer versions and place your movie where you designated to save it. Make sure that it looks and sounds right before you upload it. And that is the lesson.